for SAT, ACT prep for you guys. It's a preview class. We will be doing some problems today, but I want to give you some information first before we get started. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about a couple of line items here. First is test dates, very important. Whether you're taking the SAT or ACT, make sure you get signed up. We'll talk about those dates. Some general misconceptions about the test itself or standardized test in general. These are things I've heard from students in the past, as well as from my own sort of working with students' ideas, things to think about. Want to make sure you know why you should take this class. That's very important. The class will definitely help you. We'll talk about why. And what you can expect to see in each class. So you'll get that information here. We'll do some sample problems like I mentioned. Those will be based on kind of how much time we've got in this class in particular. And then some time at the end for some Q&A. All right, let's get started here. So if you're taking the SAT, there are some important dates. The first test for the spring here is March 11th. But what you need to know is that you have to register by February 10th. You've got some time. Make sure you register on time. I don't know if they've got a late registration process. So really the key date is February 10th. And if you're looking to take it later in the spring here, you got dates in May and June, but to pay attention to those registration dates. If you're an ACT student, or if you're thinking about taking the ACT, you actually can get the first test of the year, February 11th, but you do need to register by January 20th, which is coming up really quickly. This is actually a late registration date. The other dates listed for April 15th and the register by March 24th, those are the late dates. I believe that you will definitely want to register a little bit earlier than that. So just keep that in mind. Definitely get it scheduled. When you get scheduled, you start thinking about it. It start becoming more important to you. And we'll definitely want to see you in that class if you do end up signing up for the class for the SAT or ACT. Okay, so some general misconceptions about the test. The first one is that I should always guess letter C. I mean, I've been hearing this since the time I took the test forever ago. This is not true. You do not want to guess the letter C. You want to guess based on a number of factors. So no, this is not true. We'll actually talk about some strategies for guessing and why you should guess certain letters. I can use my calculator to solve every question. No, this is not true. There is a calculator and a non-calculator portion of the exams. The calculator does help, but only on certain questions. And it actually works against you a lot of times because it takes a lot of time to enter the problem into the calculator. So no, you don't want to rely on your calculator. You can get a good score without your calculator. I can use a trick to solve every question. A lot of students believe that there's a trick. No, this isn't a magic show. It's not a circus. There are no tricks. There are shortcuts. There are things you can do to make the problems go faster, but no, there's no tricks. You do need to know some math and you need to know some strategies. I can always use the answers to work backwards. Again, this works sometimes, but not all the time. You will use the answers as one of the strategies we talk about, but this is not always the case. It's actually slower in some cases to use the answers rather than directly solving the question itself. Here's one I've heard, and you know, sometimes it actually looks like this. Every test includes an impossible question with no correct answer. Sometimes the more difficult the problem looks, the simpler the solution is. And I'm not sure why. I've written some of these questions myself. This is just a general misconception. I would love to say that there are no impossible questions. They just appear that way. I need to know a lot of formulas. No, you don't need to know a lot of formulas. A formula sheet is given, but by the time you get to that question where you see the formula or remember that there's a formula, you're not going to go back and look for it. Yes, you need to know some formulas, but these come from Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. You probably have already seen them. There are no special formulas. Sometimes there's one for like density with mass and volume, and they give you the formula on the test. Guessing works against you. Big time no. You want to guess, well, you want to actually put an answer down for every question that you see. You can guess. We'd like you to guess. If you're really stuck, but you should absolutely put an answer down for every problem. Finally, I have to be an A or B math student to get a good score. Again, this is not true. This is not a test on your math skills. It's a test on your test taking skills. Okay, yes, it helps to do well in math and have a good foundation, but if you're a student that struggled in math and you want to get a good score, it is absolutely possible. You can absolutely do that in this class today. So why take this class? Okay, and I appreciate those that are here today. Again, welcome to those that have joined here. Why should you take this class? Well, there's some things I've learned from working with students as well as reading about this test over the years, that the best students that want to achieve the best scores, they do a couple of things that some of you are already doing. The first is private tutoring. Okay, the private tutoring really helps. This builds your technique. This is when we can work on the skills that you know that you're already weak at, or I can help you determine what you're struggling with and get stronger at. Volume. You need to do regular practice. Now, I'm not suggesting that you set aside hours and hours and hours each week. A little bit of time each week will make the difference. So regular practice. For those of you that take lessons with me, you get the lesson notes and you get the video screen recording. Just watching that can be enough. But you also need strategy, and that's where a class like this comes in. A preparation class like this one, it shows you techniques that you're not currently using in the classroom. In the classroom, you're just direct solving most of these questions. You're not learning about how to actually strategize and use the right approach for each problem, which saves you time. Finally, testing. You should plan to take the test 3 times. There's a number of reasons for that. The data shows that you get your best score as a result of taking it 3 times because of a number of reasons. One is you're just more familiar with the test. First time you take it, you're like, oh my gosh, it's a 3-hour test. How do I do this? I'm in shock. Second time, you're a little more familiar. Plus, you've grown as a math student, and maybe you've taken a prep class or gotten some private tutoring. But you also get to take your super score now, which means you get the best score from each of your sections. So when you're thinking about taking the test, especially if you are a junior, you can take it in the spring as a junior, in the fall as a senior, and the spring as a senior, or you can work backwards if you're an earlier student. I know most students end up taking the PSAT in their sophomore or junior years. Plan to take the test 3 times, okay? It will lead to a lot of good opportunities that we're going to talk about next. So why should you care about a better score? Well, it helps you get into the college of your dreams, no matter what that is. If you're decided on a state school, it will help. If you're going out of state, that's great. If you're looking at a more prestigious university, every increment in your test score matters, okay? Whether it be 20 points if you're taking the SAT, a couple of points boost if you're taking the ACT, any improvement in your score could make the difference. And a test prep class like this one will absolutely help you do that. Next, it opens up scholarship opportunities. So you're taking a class like this, you're also going to see that you can get scholarships directly as a result of your score. Scholarship opportunities also look and ask you, what is your score? They want to know if they're funding a student that's going to do well at the next level. This is important. So by taking the class, by taking the test multiple times to get your best score, it opens you up to lots of scholarship money. And just a quick aside on scholarships, sometimes that money is transferable to you, the student. It's not just for school. Sometimes they're just general purpose monies that are available. So, think of it as almost like a trade for time and work, because you can get money back dollar for dollar with your improved test score. Now, when you get to college, and this is one of those things that you don't realize until you get there, so many of the classes have gone to online testing, multiple choice testing. You need some strategies to do well. The same things apply, okay? You're going to not necessarily see the same questions, but you're going to know that this approach works, whether I'm taking an SAT, ACT, a college class, or maybe you're already like, hey, I know I'm going to be I want to go into graduate school. I want to go into the medical field, dental field, law field, whatever it may be. You're going to see more standardized questions like these. So using these strategies, taking a class like this one, it can only help you going forward. All right, now what will actually each class cover? So this is just a preview class. We are going to do some questions here shortly, but in terms of like what will a class cover, 2 things. We're going to first talk about test taking strategies. I mentioned a number of times already. So what is a test taking strategy? Well, we'll get into the specifics when we start the class next week. We'll talk a little bit about some of them today, but these strategies, they apply not just to the math section. Like you might be thinking, oh, this is math only. No. These apply to the other sections of the test, but they're designed towards math, but you can use them elsewhere, as well as in your college classes, or you might even notice some problems you see in current classroom that you can benefit from. So there's really a lot that you're going to gain. But why? Why do you want to know these strategies? Well, it saves you time. Time is constantly working against you on this exam. Okay. The more time you have, the more time you will have to try to answer other questions. It also increases your likelihood of getting the correct answer. So these strategies are designed to get you the best score because they might eliminate options, they might draw you to a certain answer, and you have a better chance of getting that correct based on these strategies. We're absolutely going to talk about math subject areas. Okay, we're going to do it a little bit different than maybe we've seen in the past. Okay. A lot of questions, and this is again kind of one of those misconceptions, is like you don't necessarily need math. There's not like a calculation to do this particular problem. And we'll see that, I think, today with some of the sample questions. But it does help to know your Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. Okay, so if we need a review, if you're unsure about something, we will definitely spend the time to look at that. But I'm going to do it in the context of questions. I'm not just going to do a lot of theory, a lot of lecture. We're going to look at questions, and then you're going to get the information you need to be able to answer those. Okay, I'm just going to take 30 seconds here, break before we get started. We're definitely going to look at some questions coming up next. If there's any questions, again, please drop those into the chat, or any thoughts you've got. Love to hear them. But we'll have some time at the end for question and answer. I will be we'll be working on some questions here. If you got pencil and paper, this is a good time to get it out, to take some notes or to look at the problems. For the actual class, you'll get lesson notes in advance to be able to work them through with me. Since this is a preview, I don't have all of that with you today. But yeah, let's get started. Okay, example number one. So at the top here, you're going to see titles. This is a word problem. A lot of times students, first time that they see the SAT, ACT, or any scenario, it's like, wow, a lot of word problems, a lot of story problems, a lot of reading. Maybe reading isn't your strength, but you have to get comfortable with that. So this problem says a physician prescribes a treatment in which a patient takes 2 teaspoons of a medication every 6 hours for 5 days. According to the prescription, how many teaspoons of the medication should the patient take in a 24-hour period? Okay, and I would encourage you to try to answer these questions as we go. You can even drop your answer into the chat there if you want. So with a question like this one, we're going to talk about a strategy about reading the question first, which means actually starting here at the bottom where it says how many teaspoons of the medication should the patient take in a 24-hour period. The reason we do that is we want to know what we're looking for. Okay, sometimes you don't have to go any further than that because you can actually get the answer here. This particular question, really, it's not even an algebra question. It might be pre-algebra. I mean, it could show up in an algebra class, but there's actually no like formula, equation, whatever. It's just a relationship. It's 2 teaspoons in 6 hours. Okay, and in this particular problem, we're now interested in a 24-hour period. Okay, so you ask yourself, okay, well, how do I go from 6 to 24? Well, you multiply by 4. 2 times 4, so you need 8 teaspoons, or letter C. And sometimes they're that simple. There isn't a ton of math to be able to answer these particular questions. So this is, if you see the 1 up here in the top right, that means it's the easiest of this type of question. So when you see a 1, that means it's not going to be too bad in terms of its difficulty. Let's look at another question here. The small delay is me trying to get my cursor ready. Okay, example number 2, equations solving for expressions 2. Okay, so this means a little bit more difficult than just a regular solving for expressions. It says if x plus 3 equals 2x minus 2, what is the value of x minus 4? So this is a great example of where a test taking strategy could help you. There's a couple of ways to solve the problem. You could first sit there and say to yourself, I'm going to solve this for x, okay? And if you're really fast, that's fine. You get x, and then you make sure you plug it back in over here on the right, x minus 4. If you don't, you could get the wrong answer. I think if we do some quick solving here, subtracting x from both sides, adding 2, we get x is 5. And notice 5 is an answer, but it's wrong. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about why is it that they put wrong answers on there, or where a wrong answer may often appear. Okay, so once you get the value of x, you plug it back in. Now that's kind of the direct method to solve this. There's an indirect method, which is, and I'll show you that here. So I'm going to do the following here. I'm going to rewrite the question: x plus 3 equals 2x minus 2. Okay, and I'm going to do the following. I'm actually going to, like we just did, we're going to get it down to 5 equals x. But notice if I write minus 4 on this side and minus 4 on the left, I get 1 equals x minus 4. And this is odd. You might be saying, well, why would you ever do that? Well, it's a standardized test. I mean, they don't use conventional types of questions on these tests. And that's one of the reasons a prep class like this will help you, because you're going to get used to seeing problems that you're like, why would you ever solve for x minus 4? That's a good question. I'm not here to answer that. I'm only here to show you that, oh yeah, there's a better way to do this. Okay, so in this problem, x is 5, right? 5 plus 3 is 8. 2 times 5 minus 2 is 8. But we want x minus 4. 5 minus 4 is 1. Okay, so I appreciate, keep those guesses going. You can direct them either to me or Chris if you want in the chat there, and be happy to follow up if you got some questions later on. So again, many ways to solve this problem. You obviously wouldn't want to think about each of those ways when you're doing it, but a class like this will help you to figure out what would work best for me to answer these questions. Okay, next question here. So we got, says in the, this is a geometry question, circles 2. In the XY plane, a circle with radius 2 has center 0, 0. Which of the following is an equation of the circle? There's actually a small error here. So this which of the following, this is a really common thing that you see in standardized tests, and you see it a ton at college. Okay, almost every question is which of the following is true, or which of the following something, something, something. You have to be comfortable with this style of question. So we talked about some formulas. If you know the equation of a circle, the general form x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, you have a real good shot of answering this question. Okay, what you would not want to do is try to graph these or do something else to figure out, well, which one could it be? So some techniques here that could help you. Maybe you're not familiar with this formula, or maybe you remember a different formula, but you know on the right, for example, that it's always radius squared and the radius is 2. Okay, 2 squared is 4. That gets you down to either B or D. So if you're really unsure if you can always get it down to 2 answers, you have a better shot of getting the correct answer. Now in this case, the center is HK. That means h is 0 and k is 0. So this is x squared plus y squared equals 2 squared, or 4. Therefore, B is the correct answer. So an example of when having some formulas does help. I don't know if this one is provided on the test, but again, they're not giving you the most comprehensive form of the formula, just using the nice one where it's centered at 0, 0. Okay, so new question here. If we were doing a class today, we would focus on a particular strategy and work on problems with those strategies. And when we look at math subject areas, we're going to focus in on all questions of the same type. We're just mixing it up a little bit today. Okay, so if f of x minus 1 equals 2x plus 3, for all values of x, what is the value of f of negative 3? Now you may think to yourself, well, I'll just put in negative 3 in for x. 2 times negative 3 plus 3, negative 6 plus 3 is negative 3, and that would be wrong. And maybe you've done this. Like I've worked with students who we work together and they're like, yeah, I did exactly that on the test. Sometimes you feel like, oh my gosh, I know how to do it. I got a number, it's there. You should ask yourself if that's really the right answer, or is it an answer that they want you to get because they're misdirecting. There's, dare I say, deception. So the key to doing this problem is actually look at this part on the left where it says f of x minus 1, f of minus 3. So you're looking at this x minus 1 and this minus 3, and you're asking yourself, well, what value of x when I subtract 1 gets me to minus 3? A couple of ways to do that. You can set them equal, add 1, and you get x equals minus 2. Guess and check also works. But really, you need to put in negative 2 into this in for x. X is not -3, it's -2. 2 times -2 plus 3, -4 plus 3 is -1. Okay, so if you're unsure, or if you're like, oh yeah, I made that mistake, this is why this class will help you. It will help you avoid the situations like this one, so that you get more right answers, increases your score, and so on. And I hope you're seeing so far the questions really aren't that difficult. There is some math, there is some computation needed, but these aren't like overwhelming questions. A lot of times you've got about 1 minute per question to answer them, so they can't be too complicated. All right, so this is an example of a free response question. I know on the ACT, you've got all multiple choice on there for the most part, but SAT, you are going to have some free response questions. So we'll talk about what to put in the free response if you're totally stuck or aren't sure. Sometimes they look really complicated. Like this one has no numbers in it other than what's on the graph. It says the graph of y equals mx plus b, where m and b are constants, is shown in the xy plane. All of that is stuff you already know. Like you as a math student, if you've taken algebra 1, you already know this stuff. So you might wonder, why am I even reading that? Well, you won't. After you take the class, you'll say, oh yeah, I don't need to read everything on these. I know when to only read this information. The question down here is pretty straightforward. It's saying, what's the value of m? So if you're a formula person, you're like, okay, slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You're like, okay, I got the formula. I'll find 2 points on the graph and I'll plug them into the formula, which absolutely works. Okay, but that takes time. If you remember that it's rise over run, well, you're going to do this problem a lot faster. If you're going to use the graph to do it and not even write anything, which is another strategy we'll talk about, how much should you write down, you're going to do it even faster. So the slope here, slope is 2 up, 1 to the right, or just 2. And I'm okay with however you do it. Like this is not about, it's not like in the traditional classroom where like they're grading your work. There is no grading your work. You just need to get the right answer. So for some of you, that's great because you're like, all right, I know how to get the right answer. I'm gonna move on. Some of you are used to having to show your work or rely on that for getting partial credit. There is none of that here. So really it comes down to, can you do the problem or not? This one's pretty basic. It just asks you to find the slope. I know how to find the slope. I got my answer. Moving along. All right, so example number 6, polynomials, multiplication 2, okay? And just like kind of like the last problem here, you don't always get numbers, okay? But there are some things you can do to make this problem doable, especially if you're like, oh, I forgot how to multiply binomials, which is what we're seeing here in this problem. It says, which of the following is equivalent to parentheses or quantity a plus b divided by 2 squared? If you don't remember or you're not comfortable with that, like sometimes you just got to draw an analogy to another problem. Like for example, let's say I wanted you to do x plus 1 squared. So the best approach here is to write these out as 2 binomials, all right? X squared plus 1x plus 1x plus 1. Simplify like terms, x squared plus 2x plus 1. And you might be wondering, why is he even doing this? Well, when I look at the answers, and this is really important, whenever you look at the answers, you should look and see what is the same and what's different. So notice A and B have 2 terms in it. C and D, well, they have 3 terms in it, okay? And sorry, just trying to get my pen back. There's no minus in the parentheses there, so you know that they're not going to cancel out. So we already know that A and B are out. And if you can get it down to 2 answers, you obviously have a better chance of getting it correct. All right. Now, sometimes you can pattern things. Like you can say, oh, I noticed that this x squared plus 2x plus 1 matches something else in this b over 2 maybe. That could help you as well. All right. So there's a lot of ways to do it. Now the direct way to do it is to actually FOIL out a plus b over 2. But if you look at the answers, there's actually 2 distinctions, this middle term and this last term. Okay, so if you're going to write it out, I don't have a ton of space, so I'll do it over here. A over b, a plus b over 2 times a plus b over 2. You don't have to FOIL the whole thing. You can just multiply the last 2 terms. B over 2 times b over 2, b squared over 4. There's your answer. Again, there's time savings there if you know the strategy, if you know what to look for. If you're like, okay, what's the same, what's different in the answer space? I'm going to figure that out, and then I'm going to only do that part of the problem. Okay, polynomials complex. So if you're an Algebra 2 student, I think you will have seen this. You might have seen it in Algebra 1. A lot of times, again, they give you information you don't need. You probably already know this. Square root of -1 is I. But you almost always see a problem in the SAT where you have to distribute a negative to two terms, okay? And if you distribute your negative to two terms, you have to make sure you do it to both. So the most common mistake here is when you don't distribute to both terms. Okay, so I've done that here. Sometimes I call it change the signs. Now, if you've written what I've got here, or this is what you're doing the test, and you start looking at the answers, you're like, well, my answer's not there. That doesn't mean that there's a mistake with the question. These things are really vetted pretty well. I don't think there's hardly ever a mistake on them. It means you haven't done something, okay? Now, at a minimum, you probably ought to be able to combine the 12i and the 6i. So that's 18i, okay? And it's positive, okay? Because positive 12, and that means the answer is D. Like, we don't even have to figure out that minus 9i squared is really 9 minus 9 times minus 1, which is 9. You're going to add 5 to it. 5 plus 9 ends up being 14. So that confirms it's D. Point is like you can do part of it and still get the right answer. Again, this isn't like your classroom where you'd get, if you wrote down just 18i, you would not get full credit. This test, they just look at machine, computer looks at it. So you have to know the strategies to be able to get these questions answered correctly. All right, new question here. So we're looking at powers, linear or exponential. A lot of you see this in Algebra 1, comes up again in Algebra 2, pre-calculus. It's like trying to decide, well, is this thing linear or exponential? Now, when I look at the answer space, I noticed a couple things. I noticed that C and D are linear. They're in this y equals mx plus b form. A and B are in this exponential form. They're in this initial value a to the power of t. So notice the difference. The variable is in the exponent versus the variable is not in the exponent. Okay, and that's how you decide between linear or exponential in terms of the form here. Okay, so if you can figure out whether this is linear or exponential, you get it down to two answers. Okay, now you don't have enough time to graph this to do that, but you can look at the rate of change or the difference between terms. You can look at like 25 over 4 minus 11 over 4. That's the, in the slope, that's the y2 minus y1. That's 14 over 4, okay? And then we do it again for the next one. This 39 over 4 minus 25 over 4 equal to 14 over 4, and it is. Now, should you keep going? Probably, but you know, we've got a limited amount of time here. We've got two that are right. I say you're good. Okay. And that tells you that it's linear. We know that this is linear, and that means A and B are out. We're down to C and D. And you start looking at what is the difference between C and D? It's the slope. The slope is the number in front of X. And we actually just calculated the slope. It's 14 over 4. And you should be saying to yourself, well, either I know that's 7 halves, or how does it become 7 halves? Well, you divide top and bottom by 2, and you get 7 halves. And again, you don't have to go any further. You don't have to verify that the intercept is minus 3/4. So by taking a class like this, you get more comfortable with the idea that it's like, if the other ones are wrong, and I have enough to show that this one is right, I answer it and move on. I don't spend a lot of time trying to show that it's fully the correct answer. Okay, another problem here to look at. I appreciate you guys sticking around to see all these questions. These are question types that you will see on the SAT, ACT, and other standardized tests that, you know, GRE, MCAT, LSAT, all those DAT. Okay, this one's proportions, word problems too. So it says a random sample of 50 people from a town with a population of 14,878 were asked to name their favorite flavor of ice cream. So I'm going to stop there. It's lunchtime. When you take this test, it's usually morning, unless you've had a big breakfast, or even if you had, maybe you're getting hungry. You got to let stuff like this just go over you. You can't think about ice cream. You've got to avoid thinking about the context of the problem. Like, it really doesn't matter. Sometimes they're written to distract you. Again, I'll keep reading here. If 7 people in the sample named chocolate as their favorite ice cream flavor. Now, maybe you love chocolate, okay? And if you love chocolate, you might be thinking about chocolate. You cannot get distracted by stuff like that. You have to say it's just a question. I don't care. I'm going to answer it and move on. How many people in the town would be expected to name chocolate? Okay, so when I look at the answers here, I notice that I'm probably going to estimate the answer. Okay, now this is probably a calculator problem, but you don't need your calculator. You just need to estimate. Plus, notice there's a big gap between like 350 to 2100, 2100 to 7500, and then even more of a gap to 10,500. So you just got to get like close in the range. Now, if the answers were very close together, then obviously you need a calculator. But that's what this class will help prepare you for. It'll say, okay, when do I need a calculator? When do I not? Because just grabbing something to punch in the answers is slow. And if you can just make a good guess, you'll have a good chance at that. So when I look at this problem, I think 7 out of 50, they like the chocolate. Okay. And that's, if you multiply by 2, top and bottom, that's about 14%, or it is 14%. 14% is about 15%. We're estimating, okay? So when I look at this number up here, it's really 15,000. And 15% of 15,000 is 10%, which is 1,500, which means that A is out. 5% is half, which is 750, okay? And if I add those together, I get 2250. Now I'm a little high, but there's no other answer nearby, not even close. Okay. And the more you do a problem like this, the more you're going to say, oh yeah, I just estimate, multiply. There's only one answer that's nearby. I've got it. Totally got it. Okay. And that's what this class will help you to achieve. So I've got one final question for us to look at today, and then we'll do some Q&A here. All right, so I'm actually going to go over to the right here and start by reading this over here. Of the labeled points, which represents the animal for which the ratio of life expectancy to gestation period is greatest? So ratio, life expectancy to gestation period. By reading this first, I know what to look for. It's actually asking for y over x. It's saying, what's the biggest y with the smallest x? So if I start looking at, well, what's the biggest y value? D is pretty big, but the x value is pretty large as well. So that might not be out. A over here, it's a little bit smaller than B and C in terms of its y value, but notice that the x value down here is significantly smaller than compared to B or D. Again, no math. Like I'm not even calculating anything here. I'm just using the idea that like a number like 10 over 50 is not as big as, say, 7 over 20-ish, okay? And if you had a calculator, you could say, okay, that's 0.2 versus around 0.3, but you don't need to. You just have to be comfortable with making comparisons between numbers, and that's a skill you can get from the math subject area portion of these. We do a ton of estimation, a ton of questions where you don't need a calculator, even though it's allowed. And those are the kinds of things that will benefit you when you take a class like this one. Okay, so a wrap up before we get to that Q&A, if there are any. Again, register for the test. When you register, it puts in your brain, oh my gosh, this thing is out there in front of me. I mean, that's why teachers put it on their syllabus. They want you to be thinking about it. It's out there, you're committed to it, and absolutely do that. Increasing your test score helps. It helps with getting into the college that you want to. It helps with scholarship opportunities. It helps with just doing well in college and whenever you see standardized tests like this one. Sign up for this class. Space will be limited. We'll meet every Saturday, and if we need to, we'll open up other test prep dates just in case you guys are asking for a different time. I am trying my best to accommodate everyone. But to summarize, with every class, what you're going to see is a test taking strategy. We'll look at least one test taking strategy that will work for you on this test. We will cover at least one subject or content area in math. We'll work on a lot of practice problems. We did 10 today. I'm not sure how many we'll do, but we'll do a bunch. Lots and lots of practice problems. That's the only way to get better. You'll have some to try on your own. You'll get some lesson notes that come with the lesson. They'll be sent out ahead of time. And then if you're already a tutoring student, then you know that you get the recorded Zoom to review. You'll have access to that and you'll be able to watch it later on. So that is it for us for today. I really appreciate you guys listening to me for this amount of time. And we'll definitely open it up for some questions. If you got questions, appreciate you raising your hand or dropping them into the chat. And I'll just stand by here, see what you guys think and have questions about. All right, we got a question here. Let me, all right. Dr. Kiathari or Sarish, are you there? Any questions I can answer
Yeah,
for you guys?
yeah. Yeah. Well, I just want to say that well, those problems in the SAT, are they going to be in the SAT? Is it going to be very hard for us to be doing that in the SAT?
Yeah, let me just go ahead and mute you. Thank you, Sarish. So these are representative questions. You will never get an exact question like the one that I show you. That's unfortunately the situation. They keep those tests really classified, for lack of a better word. You will not know exactly what questions are on the test, but we know from years of seeing these tests that you always get a system of equations, or you're always going to get a problem where estimation works. And the idea is that whenever you see a number of problems like the ones that I'm going to present to you guys are going to work on, you're going to get a better score because you're going to see it and say, oh yeah, it's like this one. Okay, there is no substitute for practice for these tests because there's nothing like it. You're not going to see them in the classroom. And so you have to do everything you can to make sure you know how to answer these questions.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. If you got another question, please appreciate you raising your hand. Anyone else out there have any questions that I can answer?
No questions over here. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. I look forward to helping you. And that will do it for today's session. So hope you have a great rest of your day and see you next time.
Bye. Thank you. Have a great day.